questions of the very knowledgeable people we have going. But we are going to start by honoring the country that has been so good to all of us. So those of you who can, please rise, face the old glories here, hand over your heart, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Thank you very much. That's what unites us, what brings us here, and what motivates us for the future. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the national co-founders of the national co-chairman of No Labels, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr., former Senator Joe Lieberman, and Governor Pat McCrory. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening. It's wonderful to be in New Hampshire. As one of the national co-chairs of No Labels, we believe that the American people want more choices and want more voices as we prepare for next year. But the reason why we're in New Hampshire today is to roll out and give all of you copies of our Common Sense Public Policy booklet, covering a wide range of issues that we've listened to the American people over the last several years. And that's the content. We believe in bipartisan, common sense solutions to America's problems. I'm from North Carolina. My background is civil rights. I'm a Democrat, but I'm working with Republicans. I'm working with independents. I'm working with Americans. We're putting nation before party. We're putting democracy before party. I'm pleased to be here for our rollout this evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Ben Chavis. Amen to your words.
This is a big day for No Labels. And I've been privileged to be here as part of No Labels since the creation in 2010. The result of the vision and persistence and hard work of Nancy Jacobson. So let's give Nancy a round of applause. And throughout the 13 years, the vision and the purpose has been the same. To reunite our political parties and our
people, to stop the partisanship and incivility and refusal to compromise that divided our country and disabled our government, and always to do it with ideas, new ideas that would command the support of a majority of people. Throughout the last decade, and certainly the 5 or 6 last years, we worked very hard to not only give ideas to members of Congress, but to help centrist Republicans and Democrats, and an occasional independent, to be elected to Congress. And they were, and they came together in No Labels encouraged groups, the House Problem Solvers Caucus, 60 members, 30 Republicans, 30 Democrats, the Senate Common Sense Coalition, with 10 members equally divided between the parties, and got up to 20 when it was necessary. And they have been responsible for some of the major accomplishments of the last 5 or 6 years. They broke the debt ceiling gridlock. They were responsible for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. They saw some of the more difficult COVID-19 bills through Congress, and the record goes on. Some of the most important accomplishments of the last 5 or 6 years have started in our No Labels caucus. Now, this year, at the request of our members, we have turned our attention for the first time to the national election next year. And it all begins today, as it always has in No Labels, with ideas. The common sense policy agenda that we are releasing here at St. Anselm's in New Hampshire really is not the ideas of no labels, though we embrace the concept and the idea of the parties working together. It's what we heard from the American people. We believe in doing what a lot of people in Washington don't do anymore. We listen to the people that we're trying to represent. And you will find in this common sense program much more agreement than you normally hear on a given day from leaders of both parties in Washington. I want to quote Joe Manchin. I heard him say it earlier today. I apologize if I stole one of his lines, but it was a great one. And at least this time when I quote it, I'll give him credit for it, which is that the American people are not divided. The leaders of both parties in Washington are divided. So I'm very proud of this agenda. I hope you will be excited by its vision and by its direction. We called it Common Sense to evoke the memory of Tom Paine's booklet, which 250 years ago energized the American Revolution and led to our independence and the creation of our great democratic republic. This year, we hope that No Labels Common Sense division helps to bring our political parties back together, revives our government, and reunites the American people. Thanks to Nancy Jacobson, thanks to Ryan Clancy, who listened to the American people and expressed their hopes for the future in this document, and thanks to every one of you who are part of No Labels, which give us the opportunity to make our country as good as the American people want it to be. I give you now Governor Pat McCrory.
Thank you very much. We are here today because of you, the American people, and especially the people of New Hampshire. I mean, what an historic place we're in to start a movement for the majority of Americans. That's why we're here today. But we're not just here today to have one function in which we have an overflow crowd throughout this building and we say hello to you. But we're also here to begin and continue this movement. And I want to briefly tell you the steps that we're going to be taking after today. The first step we're taking today is because of the release of our Common Sense agenda. Our first goal is to influence the agenda of politicians that are coming to New Hampshire and to other states during this primary season. Because if we can influence them by this common sense agenda that we put forward, then we're making a difference in this election already. So we want to influence the agenda and shape the debate. Now it's needed now more than ever. The second thing we want to do, and we're continuing to do, is we're going to gain, as part of our insurance policy, ballot access. And we've got a team out there right now throughout all the states trying to get on the ballot, following the laws of each of our states to get on the ballot. We've got volunteers signing up people everywhere. And sadly, we have some operatives out of Washington, D.C. who want to just keep the status quo as it is, who are trying to stop our efforts. But I'm telling you right now, it won't work. We're going to get on the ballot. We're going to get on the ballot with your help, and you've got to get the word out that anyone trying to block access to allow people to have more choice is unacceptable to our Constitution and to state laws throughout the United States of America. So that is a major agenda that we continue to have. And the third thing I want to make you aware of, and we hope we won't have to do it, but the fact of the matter is, if by Super Tuesday that we see the final two candidates, frankly, being Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the American people are saying loud and clear, and we'll measure that again come Super Tuesday. Right now, 60 to 70% of the American people are saying we can do better. That's not the choice we want. Now, hopefully, by shaping the agenda between now and then, things will change. For my party, the Republicans, for Ben's party, Independents, the Democrat, and for an independent. That's our goal. But if it doesn't change and we do get on the ballot access, which we will present a president and vice president candidate on a no labels ticket. We plan to do that, but only if we see we have an opportunity to win. And we're going to be listening to the American people, and that's how this agenda was formed, by listening to the American people. This is not our agenda, this is the American people's agenda. And isn't it about time that we listen to the American people to shape our nation for the future and for the next generation? We live in the greatest nation in the world. Let's don't take it for granted. God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you very much.
We have two special guests with us today, both longtime allies of No Labels movement and powerful voices for common sense and civility. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Governor Jon Huntsman and Senator Joe Manchin.
In moderating this evening's town hall, we welcome Scripps News correspondent Kevin Cirilli.
We're in the eye of the storm, huh? Hello and welcome. My name is Kevin Cirilli, and I'm a political correspondent with Scripps News. And to be clear, No Labels has not told me what I am allowed to ask, what I am allowed to ask, or anything like that. And in addition to that, Scripps News does not endorse any political candidate nor any political movement. We have a lot to talk about and a lot of audience questions that I really want to make sure that we get to about what No Labels says are common sense solutions in their proposal. But No Labels has also sparked a national debate because they are considering running a presidential ticket. They say a unity ticket with a Republican and a Democrat. So I see a Democrat and a Republican, and I will ask the obvious question, is this the presidential ticket?
You want to answer that, John? Let me just say that what we're here is basically to explain to you that we need options. And the options may be moving the parties who basically have receded to their, I will call extreme right and extreme left. And that's not who we are. It's not where we've come from. It's not the country that we are. And we're basically saying common sense. We're going around the country. I appreciate No Labels doing what they've done, Nancy and the entire team here. Thank you. I want to thank St. A's College for the Institute of Politics allowing us to be here. I think it's fantastic. I want to thank Governor Jon. Where's Governor Sununu? I know he's here somewhere. I just saw him. He's back here. But Governor Sununu, thank you. Chris, thanks for allowing us here. To my two colleagues, Senator Shaheen and Senator Hassan, we appreciate and I enjoy working with them. But I can tell you, I've been there for 13 years. People say, why are you here? John and I are here. We started this 12 years ago. We became the first co-chairs of No Labels, and Democrat, Republican. We're both governors. I was the governor of West Virginia. He was the governor of Utah. And I said, John, I think you need to get involved with this because it's everything we believe. How do you bring both parties together to make correct decisions and make good decisions? You can't do it unless you have a dialogue. All
right, Governor, the senator said that he's considering a presidential run. Are you considering a presidential run? No?
That wasn't loud and clear from Joe, but everybody wants to know what Joe's doing. I mean, it's the horse race. But Kevin, thank you for sharing the stage with us, and thanks to all who have organized tonight's event. Governor Sununu, we love you. You're the best governor out there, and we should get to but I have to say, this is a very special stage. So for those of us who have been crazy enough to run for president before, that's not something I would recommend anybody here. Thank you. It's a pretty intimidating prospect. But what you learn from the people of New Hampshire is very real. Mm-hmm. They want substance. Yes. They don't want style, they want substance. So, you can ask about the horse race. I didn't know I was going to be sitting up here until a couple of weeks ago. And Joe called me, as he did 12 years ago, and said, we've both been governors, we've been practitioners of crossing the aisle, doing important things for the people who vote for us. And what happened then was quite interesting. Nobody paid any attention to it.
Well, Senator, I mean, we are here talking about a prospective unity ticket. And in all seriousness, as you weigh your options, you've said you're going to decide by the end of the year. Would you consider him as a potential running mate?
John is my dear friend.
Better answer.
Okay? I think people are getting ahead of putting the cart ahead of the horse. We're here to make sure that the American people have an option. And the option is, can you move the political parties off their respective sides? They've gone too far right and too far left. If that movement can move, but that can't be done unless they're threatened. The only way you can threaten them is have people out there that says, listen, they can't win, either side can't win without the independent. Without that independent, that means center left, center right, an independent Republican, an independent Democrat. If they have another option, then they're in trouble. Both parties are in trouble. So they're going to have to say, okay, we better look at this again. I don't think unless we stay over here that they're going to vote for us, so maybe we can move. Let's see what happens. It's too early. Everyone thinks we need to do something.
But I'm pressing on this because if you do get in the race and you spoil the election, would that factor into?
I've never been in any race I've ever spoiled. I've been in races to win. And if I get in a race, I'm going to win. So, with that being said, I haven't made a decision. And I'm not going to make, I've never made a decision ever. Let me say this to all of you. The only place in the world, in America, does the next election start the day after the last election. Doesn't happen anywhere else. But here, we expect to be in just a continuous cycle. That's not what the American people want. Give them a break. But they want to make sure you're going to answer the problems. And the problems you have right now, whether it's basically the border security. You've got to secure this border, but you have to have a pathway forward with work visas. We need workers in this country. You've got to fix the debt problem. We're not talking about debt. When's the last time you've heard anyone talk about the debt? 10 years ago, when he and I both started with No Labels, the debt was $14.79 trillion. It's $32.5 trillion today. And no one's saying a word. No one's saying a word, no matter what we do.
15 years.
Oh.
The last 15 years, $21 trillion.
Yeah, we started out at 5.8 trillion in 2001. 5.8 trillion. We were on a downward trend. And it shot up like that. So if you want to blame Democrats, fine, we're all guilty. Blame Republicans, fine, we're all guilty. Everyone's guilty. They're not going to change their ways. And basically, if people make you believe you're divided, don't accept that. You're not divided. You wouldn't be sitting here if you were divided. It's the politics in Washington, the business of the Democrat and Republican Party that has a better model. Their business model is better if you're divided, and basically they get you all chained up and you're ready to go, and nothing gets done. So their business model is better to be divided than united. And we're going to change that.
I want to get to the audience questions, but I do want to specifically highlight this because there are a lot of Americans who are independent voters, and they are concerned that if they were to vote for a unity ticket, that it would hurt President Biden and help President Trump. What do you say to those folks as they're considering this?
You just won't let this go, Kevin.
Well, it's important though.
This is the latest talking point. It's like the horse race. Forget about the issues, forget about the importance of expanding and enhancing our democracy. So you live in a place like China or Russia, and I've lived in both, running both U.S. embassies. They don't allow any choice. There's no participation. They're complete, pure authoritarian systems. So when I start hearing people here say, oh, that's not a good thing. We shouldn't do things to expand and enhance our participation in the system. It might result in A, B, or C winning or losing. I say, I've heard that before, but not in this country. Here, we do it differently. This is the most innovative, creative, smart country in the world. Take it from somebody who's lived overseas multiple times. This is the most innovative, creative, smart country in the world. And the only element of American society that has not been transformed, every other industry has been transformed through innovation, new technology, whatever, is politics. It's still the same old, same old. I mean, if we end up in 2024 with the same set of nominees that we did 2020, I mean, is that insanity? Is that the definition of insanity or what? And that's why you've got, so what has changed from when we got together 12 years ago to today? Nobody cared 12 years ago. But in these intermediate years, there's been an implosion in trust toward our institutions and our leaders. People want more. So why is it that you've got 3/4 of the American people who say, if the outcome in 24 is same old, I think I'm going to want something different. So that brings us to today. So why is everybody here? For us, I mean, Joe, I understand, you know, for the rest of it.
Yeah, let me just say this one thing.
There's interest in this concept.
What John's saying, most Americans still believe in the American promise. Most Americans still believe in the American promise, that you can be better, have a better life, and better quality for your family, and they can do better than you've done. Most of them still believe that. I know they think it's a little bit harder now. What they don't believe in is the promises from the parties today. The political parties have not delivered. They're separating you further and further apart. So can you gain it if the political parties stay where they are today? Do you think you'll have a better life? Will your families have a better opportunity or a better quality? Education's not where it needs to be. We can't compete. Basically, other countries have outperformed us in education. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
So when you go, or Governor, put on your ambassador hat for a second, how do China and Russia specifically view the hyper-partisanship in the United States? What's happening here?
Well, I love it. So if you were to look at their internal documents to say, what do they wish upon the people of the United States? The answer would be division. Pitting American against American. Taking away any sense of e pluribus unum. Nobody even recognizes or understands what e pluribus unum is today. Out of many one. That's what our rallying cry has always been in this country. So yes, what they want to see in this country, other than a failure financially and a failure educationally, is for us to be divided and constantly at each other. Because if you could see what I have seen, living in Beijing and Moscow, when you look 10,000 miles away at this beautiful country and its beautiful people, when we are together on the big issues of the day, we shine and radiate, and we scare the hell out of China, Russia, and everybody else.
But Senator,
when we're divided, it's just the opposite.
But Senator, I mean, all that sounds great, what he's saying.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, people will they frequently looked at moderates and they see the mushy middle, where they say that the middle doesn't stand for anything, or if the middle has to cave to one of the sides. And so what is your response to the critics who say, this sounds like a great idea, but in practicality, it can't be executed?
Let me just, on the e pluribus unum, in West Virginia we have Montani, Semper Liberi, Mountaineers are always free. So you put out of many one and free on both of those and put them together, that's who we are. That's exactly what we want. We want this freedom that comes from us working together. So you're saying the mushy middle. Well, why would No Labels go to the effort to basically poll people around the country, thousands of people, input where they are, to find out, are we just thinking about something that we would like to ideologically say this is where you are, or basically you tell us where you are. And I think that's what we've been able to share. Now, why do we act on that? You think that basically our finances are in good shape? No. What should you do? You want a balanced budget amendment? There could be things you could do. So many things. Debt financing. We put a piece of legislation out. We say it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Before they wait till you get hooked, you like what they're giving you, and they debt finance it for the rest. So I know all the tricks that have been played there. I've been there 13 years. It is time to speak up and basically make sure that we're held accountable and responsible. I can assure you, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have benefited greatly by the dark money. And everybody's talking about dark money.
Well, they're also talking about whether or not, specifically with money, should groups like No Labels have to be transparent about where that money's coming from?
I would think the Democratic Party and Republican Party should be transparent. They got $1.7 billion in the 2020 election. $1.5 billion for the Republicans. That's over $3 billion of dark money nobody knows anything about. Nobody knows anything about. So I can tell you, if you want to change Citizens United, it can only happen in Washington. Both parties are going to have to pass a legislation that basically outlaws Citizens United. Then you can stop all the dark money.
Should follow
I mean, what is happening is what everybody else is doing. It's just the norm with 501c4 organizations. You're asking me if that's right or good. I say, no, I don't think it's right or good. I think there should be transparency and accountability and all things. But that's not the way people play the game. What Joe's talking about, billions of dollars run through the major parties, hidden and dark and all of that. And I've heard this, that we're, a dark money organization. The fact of the matter is the system sucks. It's broken. I mean, you could get a group of good Americans together, all of whom with an IQ over 85, in a room together, and say, does the way we finance campaigns make sense to you? And nobody would agree that how we're doing it today makes sense. So in the true American tradition, we will evolve, and I hope we heal our wounds and we fix this glaring error in how campaigns are run by campaign finance reform. I was with John McCain, whose campaign I co-chaired, and came to introduce him here in the state many times in 2008. I loved him, and I was a proponent of what he was trying to do with campaign finance reform. Reviled and hated by a lot of people, but I think it's time we get back to a rational and sane discussion about how we go forward.
So you said one thing, you said it's mushy, the middle's mushy?
I said, what do you say to people who say the middle's
Well, I
not?
can tell you, myself, I can speak and I can tell for no labels, that they would change Citizens United overnight if you could. But that only happens in Washington, so I'll be one vote. I would vote to overturn Citizens United and make it the law of the land that you cannot have dark money in politics.
All right, I want to get to our first audience question, and I believe we have a microphone somewhere in this room. Yes, right over there. And if you could please state your name and where you're from, as well as your question. Thank you.
I'm M. Friedrichs from Durham, New Hampshire, originally from Exeter, New Hampshire. And I'm worried about the flooding and the tornado watch that was right here in Manchester and all over New England this week. And this extreme weather is from more carbon in our atmosphere caused by burning more fossil fuels, like the Mountain Valley Pipeline that Senator Manchin did take as kind of a special interest and fought very hard for tooth and nail this past year. And so my question is, are taxpayers going to be the ones burdened with this, or do you agree that fossil fuel companies should be responsible for the mess they created and fund cleanup of climate crises or climate disasters?
I'm happy to speak to that because I believe in an all-in energy policy. This country cannot run unless we have an all-in energy policy. And basically 65 to 70% of your energy comes today from fossil. Can we use fossil cleanly? Yes, we have. We've cleaned up the environment more in America in the last 2 decades than anywhere else in the world. Most of all of your pollution right now in the next 10 years will be 90% from Asia. India and China are spending and using more of this without the constraints that we have. Low NOx boilers, scrubbers, baghouses for mercury. But with that, we're investing more in new clean technology, carbonless technology than any place else in the world. With the IRA bill, that's basically going to say we're going to have the fuel that it takes to run our country. We're the superpower of the world. We can't be dependent on foreign supply chains. And we can do that better. We couldn't help our allies. And let me tell you, with the Ukraine war, it showed you what Putin can use for energy. He used energy as a weapon. You can't get caught like that. Now, in a perfect world, you can have whatever you'd want energy-wise if it could do it. We don't have renewables that'll run 24/7. You want electricity 24/7. You want your heat. You want all that. The Mountain Valley Pipeline put 2 billion cubic feet into the marketplace within 6 months. It's been held up forever. Up here, you pay some of the highest prices. Why should you pay 6 times more than those and us down in the southeast, I guess, south Mideast? Why are you paying so much up here? They have no pipelines whatsoever that we can get the gas to you. But yet you were getting propane shipped in from Russia. So we know the problems that's going on here. That shouldn't happen in America. With that, we'll transition. It will happen. We don't have that technology. We don't have that dispatchable power that will run 24/7 without the fossil that we have. But we're transitioning. And it's an all-in policy right now, and I don't believe that we should leave the country to the point to where we aren't able to take care of ourselves and our military and everything else that we depend on. We are the superpower of the world.
Governor, I want to follow up specifically with what this platform, Common Sense, says, because in addition, he mentioned some geopolitics there. China controls the production and refining of 80% of the rare earth metals that are key to direct the drives in wind turbines. And half of America's uranium comes from Russia and Kazakhstan. So as we're trying to address climate change, how do we not negate national security?
Well, we have to prioritize. And national security, obviously, is a top-tier priority. But the comments made just a moment ago are very important. and they should be recognized. And if it results in coming up with a price on carbon, which I've always been in favor of, dealing more aggressively with methane releases, these are all things, this is the all of the above strategy that we ought to be talking about. But right now, we're at such polar ends of this discussion as opposed to saying, okay, where do we agree, right and left and in between? What are the overlapping elements of agreement and where does that take us? Instead, we're starting with the absolute endpoints of policy, where nobody agrees, as opposed to the initial steps that might take us somewhere. You know, anyone who's been a governor knows that that's the way business is done, state by state. You got to bring together a coalition of the willing. I was part of a carbon pricing initiative with Democratic governors in the western part of the United States. My own party thought I was crazy. But I thought if we can get out ahead of this issue and start defining some possibilities, that's going to be good for the American people as opposed to just finger pointing and a lot of crosstalk. So the all of the above strategy that we're advocating is really important. But you said something that I just want to underscore. 80% controlled by China. All of the critical minerals that will fuel some of our most important technology developments. Now, I would tell you some stories about being in Indonesia recently at a nickel site where the Chinese, I saw firsthand, where they have complete control. Indonesia is just one example of a critical material like nickel that will go into the next generation of vehicles, electric cars, and other things. The Chinese have completely outgamed us for years.
Let me just say that this is what's beautiful about it, because John and I have a different opinion. We might agree to disagree to a certain extent, but there's a pathway forward, and I'll tell you this. I have never ever supported a price on carbon for this reason, because I never saw the proceeds from that price being used to find out how I can make this table with less carbon. They used it in the Treasury and just dispersed it within basically the social services. Perfect case in point. I'm over in Europe. Macron comes to me. Both Schultz comes to me from France and England, and they're raising Cain about the IRA. You're taking all my businesses away, my investments. So I said, so I can assure you, we wrote the bill. We did not write a bill saying, how can we harm our allies and our dear friends in France and England? You all have used the stick, and you have been basically showing carbon pricing for the last 20 years. You have never come up with new innovative technology that could basically make this or make something with less carbon, because you never put the money there or the resources or the incentives. We take a piece of legislation and we use the carrot. You use the stick. Now, if you're upset with me, then you have to compete with us now. And I tell you, there's more competition in the world today from what we have done in America. We leapfrogged everybody with investment in new technology. The hydrogen of the world, okay? It's a powerful tool that we can use carbonless. And basically more of our batteries and storage that we need right now. We don't have storage. We're not getting basically what we need from the renewables, but we can get there. We can get there if we invest in it.
I want to get to another audience question, but I think this is a good point to kind of zoom back, because here's an issue where you disagree on. And if there was...
Let me tell you you want to know where the balance is here?
Where's the balance? Well,
balance is here. Let's say we have a new technology and we show them how to use all of these new technologies and even use their coal and gas and that with less carbon because of the removal of carbon capture or capturing the methane. And let's say that other countries want to sell a product into America and they haven't adapted to the new technology, then you charge a carbon pricing, what we call a border adjustment, because they won't use the new technology. That's how you. But if we don't talk about this,
I'm going to zoom back for a second, and because if there is a Republican and a Democrat, respectively,
fix problems,
who are in the White House together, how would that work? I mean, that's the question that I've been asking.
Work a hell of a lot better than what you have today.
But how? Practically speaking, because if we're as polarized as we are now, how would it actually work inside of the White House with two opposing parties in power?
Well, nobody knows. We've ever tried it.
They tried in 1864.
Yeah. Right.
Abraham Lincoln changed to Andrew Johnson.
Yeah, there was a
unite the country.
You're talking about in 60 or 65. 1860. So nobody's tried it. But listen, if you get people, and listen, I'm not trying to, offer speculation about what Joe's going to do. I have no idea what Joe's going to do. He's one of my good friends. I have no idea what he's going to do. But if you were to get Republican and Democrat problem solvers who actually have some experience running a state, for example, and building coalitions of the willing, and if you were to take the document that we have presented here today, the common sense majority document, so the common sense majority has no voice in this country. They just watch the three-ring circus play out. They have no voice. So where do you want to start the conversation? You want to start with a template of ideas, not a be-all, end-all, but what is on the minds of most Americans? So we've done a very innovative thing, which is to have tens of thousands of conversations on what people feel about the most important issues of our time. We're not making it up. And so that should constitute, that should inform whoever's elected president what the priorities should be. And then building coalitions of the willing around some of those priorities, just like states have to do, state by state.
The power of the moderates is unbelievable. The power of all of you all sitting here, you know that. People, this is one of the cradles of democracy. And people are coming here because they know you're independent. You're thinking, you expect them to answer the questions and be in.
Well, let's get to another audience question. I believe we have another audience question right over there. Again, please state your name and where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Ken Cerullo from Mahwah, New Jersey. I drove up with my family this morning. We wanted to drive yesterday, but except for that tornado warning. So, my question is this, and I also want to thank No Labels for organizing this event, and I want to thank the special guests, Senator and Governor, for being here. It's appreciated. As a father of a 3- and 5-year-old, I'm concerned about the out-of-control federal spending, the interest payments that correspond to that debt, and how it will affect my daughters and future generations. What will the No Labels candidate do to solve this political problem that has, with both parties kicking the can down the road, especially with regard to entitlements?
First of all, the balanced budget amendment would do that. John and I both had to live under that.
Can you imagine governors actually have to, they have to balance their budgets?
Every Tuesday morning, Tuesday afternoon, I have my finance team come in. And they said, this is what your estimates are, and this is the changes you have to make or adjustments. We'll wait one more week, and then you have to call the shot. So we know what it's like to live within that framework. We didn't have a printing press downstairs, okay? We couldn't debt finance at all. And that's exactly what's happening. I know this, what's being done right now. But let's go back to the whole financial responsibility. Your children won't be taught, probably, maybe not, I could be wrong, any civics whatsoever, understanding the government and how it works. I doubt if your children will have also financial literacy taught in their school to teach them the value of a dollar, how it's spent, what the risks they're taking. They won't be talking about any of that. The United States of America, we put so many regulations on banks, risk managers, and we saw what happened to CVB. We don't have a risk manager at all. We do nothing. We have the Treasury Department that should have a risk management team inside telling us when we're getting ready to go over the cliff. We're at 135% of debt to GDP. 135%. We haven't been here since World War II. We were fighting for survival in World War II. This is self-inflicted. And nobody's saying a word. If we're on this trajectory here, it's been estimated we'll be $170 trillion by 2050. If we don't change, $170 by $170 trillion, 2050. Just the interest on that will be $5 trillion a year. There will not be a superpower of the United States of America. It's not sustainable. And nobody is talking about that. So every bill that we do should have a cap on it. You cannot exceed that cap. And it should be a pay for. And then basically, how do you protect the necessities? In my state, Social Security and Medicare is the lifeline for so many people. How do you extend it? How do you make it work? How do you make sure that if we do nothing, and we sit here and give you just jibber jabber, in 10 years, by 2033, if you're getting $1,000, take $240 off of that. You lose 24%. That's exactly what's going to happen. And every politician said, it was not my fault, this is automatic, they did it. Well, no, it's been your fault because you never stepped up and did anything. And how can we do it? We have a cap on some of the higher incomes. We have some people says, oh, well, if you're under 400, you shouldn't pay anything. No more. Well, we have some people on the top of the food chain that probably could get away with not even taking, especially their COLA, let alone anything else. There's so many ways to fix it. But you're not going to fix Social Security and Medicare unless you have more workers paying into it.
Well, one of the principles.
And that's what we're talking about here. I'm concerned about my grandchildren and your children because I can assure you, Mike Mullen told me this, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, my first Armed Services meeting. I'm trying to learn about all the different concerns of the world. What's our greatest fear as China, Russia, all that. He got up and gave a statement. He says, listen, the greatest fear the United States faces is the debt of the nation. The debt of the nation will take you down quicker than anything else. My grandfather always said this, Joe, unmanaged debt will lead you to make cowardly decisions. I guarantee you, and he was right. And that's exactly what we're doing now. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and your children will be left behind if we don't do it now.
One of the things in common sense in this platform, it says that, quote, no one in retirement or close to it should face benefit changes, and no middle class or lower income Americans should face a benefit cut. Okay, how do you do that?
Everybody has to pay into the system. Everybody has to pay into the system. In West Virginia, the system's $160,000, right? Your taxes, FICA tax, $160,000, I think is the income level. Most, 99% of West Virginians pay 100% of it. Take a high income earning state, maybe only 50% pay. There's changes have got to be made there, and it's got to be done so everyone's participating at the same level. And they're not doing that now.
Governor?
Can I just say that this is kind of a mind-numbing conversation because we're playing this loop over and over and over again, year after year after year. Same questions from 2012. Yet we're not doing anything about it. I mean, we talk about the debt. Did anybody hear what Joe just mentioned in response about our greatest existential threat? $21 trillion we have spent since 2008. It was only $10 trillion from 1787 until 2008, the year that we were re-elected governor. We're not even talking about the most fundamental and basic threat to our well-being and our system. I don't know why we're talking more about cocaine in the White House than we are about the numbers, and maybe it's because they're mind-numbing. And the same holds true with an entitlement reform. We talk about it year after year after year. And I'm almost led to believe that a statutory commission that can jump into this with authority to actually make some tough calls with no amendments.
What are some of those calls that they should be given the authority to make?
Well, they can figure that out, but I think means testing can be a big part of this.
Stress testing too, Joe.
There's a big part of the population that doesn't need any of the above. So why don't we just start with that as a going-in premise and how much that would save us as we go forward?
Let me give you one so you'll know the scope of what we're talking about. For the last 21 years, consecutively 21 years, we have spent more money than we've taken in this country. The last 21 years. Can any of you or any of us, any business, any family survive with spending more than they have to pay for 21 years straight? Think about that. That puts everything in perspective.
All right, I want to get to another audience question, and I believe we have one right over there.
Stephen Bourne, Rye, New Hampshire. So from my personal campaign experience last fall running as an independent, I found that many people are voting against, not for. If we want all the federal government we're buying to work for us and not the power of a political party, how can Americans be convinced that now is the time to be brave, knowing that the downside risk of the side they fear the most, Trump or Biden, could win? Nothing's going to change unless we do things differently. So how can these common sense positions in the unity ticket get the American people to finally be brave?
By doing what you're doing tonight, showing up, being here, being part of something. Look at all the chatter that it is already, the interest into pro and con. Why are people scared to have an option? Why are they scared that they may be threatened to do the right thing? Why are they scared to say, hey, you're too far to the left here, that doesn't make any sense. So we don't live our life over in the extremes. I don't live my life on the right or the left. I've got to make decisions for myself and my family pretty much in the center. Center, left, center, right. And the Republicans, I've said this, I've never met the first person that's always wrong. But I've never met the first person that's always right. Now, I've walked away sometimes thinking that because I never spent enough time to extract the value they had. That's our fault. John, I can sit here and talk. We can agree, we can disagree. I guarantee you one thing, we'll find a pathway forward. We will find before the day's up a pathway forward. But if my business model is more of you all will support me or more of you all will give more money to my campaign, if I don't work with John and set and make something happen, And pretty soon the business model becomes the driver. That's what drives it. It's not basically rewarding for working together and solving problems. We're expected to do that. This is a democracy. We have a representative form of government. And I asked your children, if I was ever in your classroom with your kids or grandkids, I would say, what have you done today for your country? And they look at me. I said, what have you done today for your country? He says, why would you ask a question like that? I says, it's yours. You own it. It's a republic. And it's a representative form. So what have you done? And they start thinking. They said, I don't know. I said, anything. Because when you own something, the value is how you take care of it.
Sir.
And no one knows. We don't teach civics anymore.
Senator, with all due respect, the polls suggest that the majority of young people are trending downward when they are asked if they feel patriotic about.
We haven't taught them about being patriotic. They don't know what the country. They don't know how we got here. If you don't teach it in school and it's not being talked about, they don't understand the value of what we have.
Why do you think more Americans feel less?
And I share
young people.
And I share one thing, and John's going to come back.
And then I'll turn it over.
No, that's good.
It's because young people. Why am I an expert at this? Because I've got 7 kids. I've got two in the Navy who were terribly patriotic. One an F-18 pilot, and the other head of a bomb squad. They're good and courageous people. I have another who's a Foreign Service officer at the State Department, a young girl who we adopted from China when she was quite young. People do not feel connected to their country. They don't have a reason to be invested in their country, to protect it, to get out and vote, and to learn about the issues. So how do you change that dynamic? Well, one of the reasons that Mary Kay and I and our 2 sons in the Navy, one of the reasons they feel connected is because they have to serve. They have to put some skin into the game. So we actually advocate in this document for some kind of national service for young people, which I think would be a great thing to do. Again, I've lived in multiple countries. Almost every country in which I've lived, there is mandatory service of some kind. I'm not talking just about military service, but how about teaching? The most noble career in the world, being an educator. How about that? How about working the problems that we've got around the country in terms of giving kids an opportunity to have some ownership in this country and to reflect upon what the ideals and values of this country mean to them? Then we're going to get around to the earlier question, which is one of the reasons we're not getting these big issues on the to-do list is because we haven't made problem solving a value among voters. So politicians respond to signals, right? And if the signal is, you're not going to get my vote unless you can figure out how to solve this on a bipartisan basis. When was the last time you heard a candidate come through here who even mentioned the word bipartisan? It's like, it's a term that may suggest you're somehow weak. But that's how business is done ultimately. You've got to have a coalition of the willing in the middle, usually, that gets things done. So in short, I will say, the onus is on many of you in this most innovative state called New Hampshire. And that is, when people come through here, you need to make it a point to say, what are you going to do to highlight these issues that are really the important ones to us? We value problem solving. We value bipartisan interaction, one with another. That's when you're going to see it register.
Can I follow up on the point that you made, Senator, which was this trust in the process? And when you have former President Trump saying that the results of the 2020 election were not legitimate, and a large portion of his supporters who believe that, how do you get back the trust of all Americans into the democratic process?
It is so sad to be in a situation to live in a great country such as this where people are led astray for either social media in so many different ways they're receiving their information and get totally confused. The bottom line is, a person who believes the only election, a fair election, is the one they win, it's not real good. The only law pertains to everybody but me. Not real good. The rule of law is what makes us different. It makes us different than any place in the world. And when you see Madam Justice and she's blindfolded for a reason. She don't know what color you are, she don't know how much money you have, where you come from, but you all have equal access to the law, unfettered. And it's just something that just gets me, that when I said, I was there January 6th. January 6th happened. That was an insurrection. It wasn't a visit. It was a visit. I've been talking to all of them. It was really an insurrection, okay? And basically, I spoke to the people in Georgia, the officials in Georgia, Republican officials, the governor, Secretary of State, and the Attorney General. And those elections were accurate. They counted 3 times. They said, we never count elections this much. So, you know, you have to believe the facts and accept them. And the one thing about, in the political process, when the race is over and the people have spoken, you move on. That's democracy, the orderly transfer of power. And that's what the whole world is watching us. And if they see they can divide us, and John really speak, when they can divide us, then they've conquered. They don't need to fight us. They don't take us to war. They don't want to fight us. They can see us fighting ourselves. They've won.
Are they leveraging that? Are other adversaries leveraging the division via social media platforms, for example, Governor, in the United States to drive that division, not just amongst political parties, but amongst race, amongst sexual orientation? Are they trying to instill hate into the democracy?
So the name Yevgeny Prigozhin is well known to everybody now. The person who ran the another insurrection in Russia. So Yevgeny Prigozhin was Putin's chef. He ran a restaurant in St. Petersburg, and later was given the military food contract, which made him a billionaire. But what a lot of people don't know is that Yevgeny Prigozhin in the neighborhood of St. Petersburg, where he is from, also ran some of the darker operations that Putin sent him to do. So the black box operations that Prigozhin has been famous for, including the troll farm outside St. Petersburg. So when we read Facebook and Twitter, a lot of social media, and we see these extreme, the extreme commentary on both sides seeking to divide we as Americans around race, around gender, around anything else that can be exploited, after school shootings, after unfortunate incidents. Well, guess who's at it? Yep, the Russians. They're pretty good at it, and they've been doing it for a long time. And I wish more Americans were aware of that, realizing that the damage we think we're doing to one another, that it's a fellow American behind it, not always.
On an issue like gun rights, just to switch into...
Let me just say one thing on that right there. As Americans, I think the response when they get you asking about different generations of what you think about this and the wokeness and the genders and things, I've just said this. My simple answer is this. I was raised to believe that every American should have the opportunity to have a quality of life. I don't care who you are, I don't care who you love, I don't care what you are, you should have an opportunity for quality of life. That's my job. That's my job to make sure you have that access. And we can treat each other. I mean, the love of America, the whole world's watching us on this, and the children, and one final thing on that, I'm in China one time, and we wanted to find out how their education system worked. My wife's an educator, and we went to one of their exemplary schools, and we did a 12-year-old girl, 6th grade. And we just asked the question, I asked the question, what do you think about America? What do you think about our country? She says, I wish I could think like Americans. Think about that. She said, I wish I could think like Americans. She told me everything with that one statement. They don't have the ability to be anything they want to be. They can be anything they want. They can have any education opportunity they want. We take all that for granted in this wonderful free country. And you're going to talk about guns now.
It's one of the most, I mean, respectfully,
Absolutely.
We haven't talked about gun shootings and mass shootings in this country. It's one of the most concerning issues in the United States right now, and it's also one of the most polarizing. And so how do you address the very real mass shootings that are occurring? Because respectfully, Congress has not done anything on gun.
Some, Kevin, but not much. You're right. I agree with you. I've tried. After the Sandy Hook shooting, this is, my goodness, I come from a state that's a gun state. In West Virginia, if you don't have a gun, they'll give you one when you get there. So it's just the way we were raised. But we were raised with gun sense. We were taught how to use a gun. We were taught how to carry a gun. We were taught that we don't loan our gun to strangers. We don't even loan our gun to a family member that's not responsible. You never sell your gun to somebody you don't know. That's gun sense. That's a gun culture. Now, all of a sudden, we've opened this thing up. And I started thinking, where did this happen? So, to have I've got grandchildren, 10 grandchildren, and I have my daughter, who I know she flinches every time she sends her kids to school now. The school should not be the killing fields. We should not allow this to happen in America. But with that being said, then, the people that we know and the people that we should know that are absolute criminals or are going to do heinous crimes or have mental illness should not be allowed to have access. We have to do a much better job. Some of this, basically, I'll give you the gun laws of 1934. Remember all the machine guns back then? We see the movies and everything. In 1934, they didn't outlaw the machine gun. You can still buy one. It's very difficult. It's very costly, but you can buy one if you're a true sportsman. We've never had a mass killing with a machine gun. But now we have all of these others. So maybe there's things that we could do that making sure that the people, the most dangerous people, can't get their hands on it. And the people aren't basically restricted what they want to buy as long as they're buying it for the right reason and they have the confidence to do so. So there's a balance here to be had, and everyone's talking about elimination, this, that, and everything else. And the Second Amendment comes up. But the bottom line is we must protect our children, and to have America, what people are seeing across the globe, what's happening in the streets of America, is basically they're winning the battle, the same as the drug cartels are winning it, and same as China's winning it, saying the precursor to fentanyl into there and killing 60,000 Americans every year.
So how do you make the schools safer, Governor? Especially when there's such polarization on an issue like this.
This is a heartbreak of an issue. The violence, the tragedy, the way it plays out, the way it impacts we as Americans when we see this happen. It is a heartbreak. What we're not speaking about seriously enough is a mental health crisis that exists in this country. And it's only been supercharged by COVID. And I'm involved in building a mental health institute out west in Utah. And we've got a big problem on our hands. How we get more mental health awareness into schools, how we get it into rural areas where we have suicide rates, sadly among some of those who have served in uniform or veterans, it's off the charts. And I think a lot of this over time could be avoidable, but we need early detection and recognition. We need enough mental health support to be able to deal with serious cases when they've been identified. We need insurance policies that actually recognizes mental health on the same plane as physical health. And right now there's a huge gap. So a lot of untreated cases, things that people don't even want to talk about because of the stigma.
I want to get to another audience question, and I believe we have our, yes, right over there.
My name is Jeff Erickson. I currently live in Bow, and to make Governor Huntsman say I am formerly from Murray, Utah. My question, over the last decade, we have seen many enlisted soldiers pass on renewing their contracts as they don't see the military as a viable career, or people who want to serve get turned down for service because of a broken appeal system to get waivers for certain medical conditions. If either one of you were president, how would you come together with both political parties in order to fix this issue?
I think I can speak on the military, and the greatest recruitment I have seen is from the ROTC, junior ROTC, all the way up to ROTC into the college system, paying for education. A lot of the families have a tradition, and a lot of our military is served by family traditions. You might have first, second, third, fourth generation. We have Admiral Blair here. He could probably speak to this better than anybody. But we're having a challenge right now. And the bottom line is that education attainment, okay, criminal codes, some types of violations you might do as a youth and can't get them into the military arena. We can look at all of those things. But the bottom line is we cannot allow the readiness and quality of the men and women who serve to be relegated to basically a lower standard. That's what keeps us different than any place in the world. We have the most professional military. Now, when I was going through the time they were drafting, everybody was getting drafted and that, but they've come to the conclusion that we're going to have a professional military, well-trained, well-paid, well-disciplined. Now, if that's not working, the only people who are meeting the quotas right now are the Marines. They're still very, very attractive people, that macho Marine. Whether it be a man or woman today, they want to be involved as a calling. But we're having trouble in all of our others. But we're still doing well. Now, with that being said, National Guards, the National Guard of today is not the National Guard of your grandfathers or father. These are professionals. They're professionals, and they're ready to serve, and they've been filling a gap all over the world. So there are so many things we can do. There's the thing called Challenge Academy. I don't know if you've ever heard of this at all, but Challenge Academy is where they take wayward children, and we put them into basically, it's a boot camp, and it's run by the National Guard. And while I'm so proud of this, because I was such a big proponent in West Virginia as governor, we just had a kid who would have been going to juvenile, probably ended up in prison, now going to go to West Point. Went through the Challenge Academy. It's unbelievable as far as turning people around. But we have to make it basically the patriotic duty that we all have to serve. And when John talked about national service, every 18-year-old should give 1 year of service of some kind to this country, somewhere, somehow, 1 year of service. And we're talking about even military, could be health care, could be education, it could basically be welfare work, could be an awful lot of things where we have basically a void all over the country that people need assistance, especially in rural states.
Yeah. I want to recognize Admiral Blair, who was here, as Joe has, one of my heroes and somebody who has served this country so valiantly. No labels, as with Dr. Ben and Joe Lieberman and so many others. It's just such an honor. So I would say that, first of all, we should not let recruiting and retention become a crisis within this country, as it was after the Vietnam War. So I'm old enough to remember the post-75 period and the rebuilding that had to occur. I think a lot of people in this country are weary of 20 years of war in the Middle East, failed deployments, execution of strategies that went nowhere. And I think in some cases it's been a turnoff to people because we have not deployed wisely in some cases. And we have squandered resources and lives have been lost. So we don't need to go more into that. But what I hear from my own sons who are well into the system, what I hear from their colleagues, and sadly, many of them are thinking about leaving early. Not because they aren't the best in the business, but because sometimes the military doesn't do a very good job of connecting talent with opportunity. You're stuck in a pipeline, you have to do your time, you got to check the boxes as you go. It's sometimes a very bureaucratic exercise. So in a time of war, you can't do that. In a time of war, there are battlefield promotions where things move rather expeditiously. But I fear that we could be entering a period where there's a downturn, more than we're seeing already on the recruitment side, and the numbers coming out of the Army most recently have been a little alarming. But I think the military does need to reform itself within. It's a great meritocracy. It's a colorblind organization. It does some greatly innovative things. But moving people along, matching talent with opportunity, sometimes is not done in ways that keep people in the system when there's so much outside trying to pull them away to more lucrative ventures.
Sir, do you feel your question was answered? All right, I think we have one more audience question, and then I want to wrap things up, but I believe we're right in the back, please. Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming back to New Hampshire, Governor, Senator.
Thank you.
I am from Hollis, New Hampshire, but I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so West Virginia is sort of like a beloved neighbor.
You Steeler fans still yet?
I won't. I
understand.
Claim the fifth. How's that? So my name is Dr. Laura Landerman Garber. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I appreciate what you said, Governor, about the mental health crisis. So I'm going to tweak my question a little bit. As you all know better than anybody, so many political discussions reveal a partisan ideology, we'll say. And we all know, and you know, that the issues we're talking about belong to all Americans. And as a clinical psychologist of 40 years here in the Granite State, I sit with people who are struggling with mental health issues and challenges. They're not talking about whether they're a Republican or they're an independent or if they're a Democrat. They're talking about their mental health concerns. So here's my question, which I'm going to tweak a little bit because you answered some of it, Governor. As, how do I say this? As a culture, as a country that has a national mental health crisis, and I would say it's profound, and we're in it on a marathon level. We're not doing a sprint. Where 22 veterans a day plus, and their military warriors or families are committing suicide. So while we're here for 2 hours, that's 2 of our veterans who are already gone. And 1 out of 3 adolescent girls in high school are considering suicide and are depressed and anxious. I was going to ask some of your concrete plans from a common sense perspective, but I guess I want to ask, would you be willing to start or create a 4-year mental health commission with the option to renew and have a mental health czar? And this would be a mental health, multidisciplinary mental health commission.
From my standpoint, from Congress's standpoint, we should, because basically, I grew up when there were institutions. Do you remember about the institutions? Then they deinstitutionalized in the 80s, late 80s, I think, when that went by. They went to group homes. They said it was not humane having people in a institution. They went to group homes, and then the money ran out. And then they became homeless, and then crime set in. It was mostly around mental illness. We all knew that. And it continues to flourish today to the point we haven't done anything more about it. So yeah, how do you do that? How do you get to it? How do you get by the HIPAA laws? How do we basically get by HIPAA laws to the point where we're trying to save a person's life, but we can't get the necessary information to interject or intervene in their life to save them because we can't get the medical records. So all of this has to, and it has to come from a commission that's done. DHHS, or you're saying what they have inside of DHHS now, is not working because it doesn't put all the synergy towards mental illness. And it's rampant everywhere. A lot of our homelessness is mental illness. And a lot of the crime, and most of the jails are filled up with mental illness.
I would love an independent commission.
I love an independent everything.
There you go.
You know, I would have, if we could talk after this, I'd be happy to take your information. It's very, very helpful and very much so.
Thank you. I think clinicians on different disciplines, insurance executives, community mental health executives, we need to come together. This is a non-partisan.
I
It's
agree.
not bipartisan. It's not a non-bipartisan. It's a non-partisan issue.
Well, we made it with Medicaid, basically, a lot of the poor in Medicaid, we've made that more of a payment. Now we can get services for them. We have trouble getting clinicians, I mean, all over the country. And again, this should be 1 year of service of some type of national service that would lead people understanding the need of America. Okay.
Thank you for your question, and I just want to follow up actually specifically. If you love an independent everything, are you an independent or are you a Democrat?
I'm the most independent Democrat you've ever met.
He's getting closer to the edge. As that great Yes album used to say, closer to the edge. He's getting there.
I just quickly, just for a final question for each of you. For you, Governor, there was a comment last week that I wanted to ask you about from Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she proposed that the United States withdraw from NATO. And, you know, given you're a Republican, you obviously have served our country as ambassador to Russia, to China, to Singapore, and had other titles. What is your response to Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Well, part of the problem with politics today is that we're even talking about this from the source. I mean, if you want to give me some serious commentary, as opposed to just sort of continuing the fun and games of the three-ring circus, that I'm happy to talk about. But when we just go back to the same old flamethrowers, that's part of the problem. And we become so conditioned to it. It's like, let's just keep the entertainment system alive and well. Wrong on our part. Wrong on our part. So I will answer by saying I think people are waking up to the importance of the notion of collective security and how it multiplies and enhances our capabilities abroad with like-minded countries. So do I wish that more NATO members paid up 2% of their GDP in support of their defense? Of course, that should be mandatory, and for whatever reason that's falling behind. But I think there's been a huge wake-up call in recent months. I never thought I'd live long enough to see Finland in NATO. I live long enough to see Sweden in NATO. I mean, this is like mind-numbing. And so Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin wakes up every morning and he says, this is my worst nightmare come true. My whole front doorstep is now dominated. The front doorstep that he hoped to keep independent. And through his black box of tricks, keep them destabilized so he could control them, much like is happening in Ukraine and Georgia and Moldova. So NATO plays a role. I think it's recognized now more than ever, the important role that it plays. And I hope that through this chapter, that the good people who are in Europe, members of those NATO countries, will see fit to actually start funding some of their own defense.
If I can say one thing along those lines, I truly believe that all 435 people that are elected to Washington want to do good. It's too hard of an ordeal to get through not to want to do good. And why the system basically rewards bad behavior is beyond me. That's the problem. Someone like people you talk about, I think there's good there. And Fred will tell you, Fred knows him, Fred Upton's worked with everybody, and he knows what's going on out there, and Joe's here, I think, another congressperson. We've got them all here. They truly have good and have a lot to offer, but if you continue to reward people for bad behavior, it'd be like having your kid. The longer they scream, the more trouble they get into, the more you reward them. They're not going to get better. And that's the problem. That's where No Labels comes in and says, listen, stop all this. Come on. And I'm of an age that I remember, and everything that John Kennedy I read about and said and heard, his speech, ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country. We're turning into to where the psychic of the nation is, how much more can my country do for me? We're not going to make it. Your children and grandchildren aren't going to want to live in a country when they're expected someone else to do something for them. And that's why things we've talked about today, things that are in the common sense that the No Labels has worked, Andy and Emma worked so hard, and Bursky and Emma worked so hard on this, and all of you. I can't thank you enough for allowing us to come and have this discussion, because we can talk about the real problems. We don't have to villainize the other side just because they might think different than I do. And I'm not going to campaign against a sitting colleague. You send whoever you want from New Hampshire. You've got 2 great senators, and you've got Congress people. I'm going to work with whoever you send. And they all are here to represent you, and I'm here to represent West Virginia, but I'm truly an American first. If my country does good, my state's going to do pretty good.
And this is the final question for you, Senator. We are in New Hampshire, and we are with New Hampshire voters, and you have said that you are considering running for president, and I'm not, no.
I gotta give you credit, God.
You're not going to
I love you, Kevin, baby. Let's go.
In all seriousness, it's truthfully, what goes in, this is the most important job in the world. What goes into that decision?
If we're able to basically show with how many responses, Nancy, with 10,000 or more surveys across the country, more than that? 50,000 surveys across the country. We'll do 50,000 more surveys. If we're showing you the common sense that most Americans want to be governed by, and neither is doing that, and we can't push them back to the middle, that'll be a time to make a decision, whether it's me or anybody else. We're not here. I'm not here running for president tonight. I'm not. I'm here trying to basically save the nation. I'm concerned more now than I've ever been concerned in my lifetime. I have 3 children and 10 grandchildren, a tremendous amount of friends and colleagues. I'm concerned and they're concerned. But I'm in a position where I had a woman one time say, Joe, you don't know how bad things look. And I said, really? She says, yeah. And I said, make sure I understand. You're talking about politics. Yes. You're sitting at home after a good dinner, sitting down watching television and saying, my God, that's awful. Try it from my seat. Try it from my seat. And then have to go through. So yeah, I want to do things. My vote is very unpredictable because I vote on the facts. If it makes sense and I can go home and explain, I'm going to vote for it. If I can't explain, I'm not. They can't pressure me. They've tried. They've done everything they can. They can't do it. I told them one time, We'll play Russian roulette, load all the bullets, and pull the trigger, because I'm not changing. I know what's coming, and I'm not changing. So you have to have the backbone. You know why? I'm not afraid of losing. The sacrifice I'm making, I'm not afraid of. Thank you. Thank you all.